Hey everybody, it's Mike. I'm back. Another video lesson. So this one I'm going to talk about flam patterns, flams and flam patterns that you can use to make your drumming better. So if you watched the warming up video, I talked a little tiny bit about flams and why they're important. Well, first of all, if you're a student or you're a marching percussion person, flams are just something you got to know. No questions, you got to play flams, you got to play them well. And again, this isn't to show you how to properly execute a flam, because there's a million things on the internet from people who are much better than me showing you how to execute flams correctly. But I would like to talk a little bit about how, specifically the order in which we teach flam rudiments, but also give you some exercises with flams in them, and how I teach them to get the best results with my students. And mostly that's the order in which we teach that whole group of flam rudiments. So first, I obviously start with the flam, or hand-hand flams, meaning a right flam, a left flam, a right flam, a left flam. Right? Now, flams are important even if you're not a marching guy, because when you're sitting at your drum kit and you're playing beats, every time you play two surfaces at the same time, you're essentially playing a flat flam, and you would never really want to sit at your practice pad or your snare drum and purposely play flat flams. But you know, in the context of playing a groove, you want those things to line up nice and even right at the same time. So in order to do that, in order to get those kind of coordinations working and your brain kind of in that frame of mind, when you sit at your practice pad or your snare drum, you can do flam things. Also, playing flam patterns makes your hands a lot faster, because whether you realize it or not, you're playing a lot more notes, but you're not actually speeding up the tempo. You're pushing more because of all the grace notes. You're putting more notes into the same amount of space. So anyway, when I start with flams, obviously I talk a lot about how to execute a flam, stick heights, so on and so forth, what part of your hand and wrist to use, and heights and all that stuff. If you want that, then you either got to come and have me come to you and teach you some drum lessons, or you just got to jump on the internet and do some Googling and figure out which explanation of how to play flams is the one that works for you. So anyway, when I'm teaching students, I think it's really important to do the flam rudiments in a particular order. And usually I'm the guy that says, hey, every student is a little bit different, and you have to explain things a little differently to each student so that they can understand them and they can grasp the concept enough to actually play them. So, but in the case of flam rudiments, I still think that, but there is a really particular order that we teach flam rudiments in, that we should teach flam rudiments in, that will give you the best result in the shortest amount of time in terms of what your student can do. Okay, so once we get flams down, and I will show you flam, flam, hand-to-hand flams, right in the center of the pad or the drum, and it's important to know that you can physically see which hand the flam is on when I'm playing. I've talked a lot about Bill Bachman's book. I use all those exercises for hand-to-hand flams because his are really good. And I also use kind of a variation of one of his, which I'm going to show you. Okay, so I got my metronome at 100 beats per minute right now. It just happened to be where it was when I opened up the app. But what I do is to work hand-to-hand flams for me, like in terms of keeping mine clean and sped up, is playing a measure of quarter note flams hand-to-hand, followed by a measure of eighth note flams hand-to-hand, followed by a measure of eighth note triplet flams hand-to-hand. Okay, so that sounds like this. Okay, one more time with that. So that's quarter notes, eighth note triplets, but all alternating flams. So here we go. And I work that Today I happen to be at 100, but I usually start around 90 and I work my way up through about 150, 160. Okay? So once my students can do that at decent tempos, and I don't expect them to do it at 150 like I do, because they haven't been playing for 30 years. But at decent tempos, usually with high school students, I try to target that tempo at 120, particularly when they're in the marching band, because that's the tempo that everyone marches at. So I want them to be able to play those triplet hand-to-hand flams at 120, so that when they have music at school, they can not have any problem just picking up the sticks and playing whatever they're given. So once I get the hand-to-hand flam things down. Now, if you look at the rudiment listing, a lot of things list flam, then flam tap. And I'm telling you that don't teach flam tap right after you teach flam. And here's why. When you teach flam tap, you're teaching them to play a flam on whichever hand, a right and then a right tap, then a left and then a left tap. And that will ingrain in them so that when you want them to play flam accent, it's going to be hard for them. So what I'm saying to you is teach flam, then teach flam accent next. Flam accent being this. And all we're doing is getting that in their brain and in their hands, that when they play a flam on the right hand, the next note needs to be a left. And then vice versa. When it's a left, the next note needs to be a right. Because that's a true alternating pattern. So then, so we got flam, hand-to-hand flam. Right? Then I teach them flam accent. Okay? And then I teach them flam cue. Okay, because that's just taking that alternating pattern to another level with making them accent the next note after the flam and not just playing a tap on the other hand. So flam cue being, okay, and on the left, okay, so that is one version, and there are several variations or several ways that I practice and teach flam cue. Okay, and that was the first one. So if I play a right-handed flam cue, which means the first and the last note are right-handed flams, okay, I just play it and put a minute pause or a rest after it and start again on the right hand. So it's always right, 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 okay? And then I make them do it on the left. Left, 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 okay? So then, there's two more ways I pretty much make people do this. Those have, that would be 4/16 notes and a quarter note on the end. So there's a space so that it gives the student a chance to reset their hands and their brain and play the next flam cue accurately. But then you could also encounter it in a string of, say, 16th notes. So on the right hand, what I'm doing is taking that quarter note flam and turning it into the first note of the next flam cue. So it continuously goes like this. And then on the left. Okay, so that's another way to have, for you to practice flam cues and to have your students, if you're an instructor, play flam cues. Now, the other way I do flam cues, and this is actually strangely how I first learned them, I came from the school of thought that everything alternates unless it's sticking is specifically marked on the page. And what I mean by that is quite literally, if the last note you played is a right, the next note needs to be a left. And if the last note you played was a left, the next note needs to be a right. No matter if it's a flam, a double stroke, 30-second note, whatever it is, it needs to alternate, unless the person writing that music wrote a sticking it. So when I learned flam cue, I learned to alternate them. And I used them with the space in them. So I would do a right-handed flam cue, then a left, right, left, right, left, right, left. Okay, so to recap that flamacue bit, the first way you do flamacue is always starting on the same hand with a pause in them. All rights, then of course all lefts. Okay, then the next way is continuous flamacues. All on the right, all lefts. Okay, so those are that, and then alternating flamacues with spacing. So that's the flamacue. So once my students have hand-to-hand flams, flam accents, and then flamacues, then we could go into the other flam rudiments with the double stickings. So flam tap, or what is it? Swiss Army triplet. Okay, and the reason I teach them that way is because if I do flam tap as the second flam rudiment, when I go to do flam accent with them, I'm always going to get a Swiss Army triplet out of that student, and that's not what we want. It's easier for them to go from the alternating patterns to flam tap and Swiss Army triplet. Of course, there are more flam rudiments than that, which it's up to you to go check out the rudiment listing and learn those, or come and take lessons with me. One of the two. But so that's my little shtick on flams and teaching flams and the order that you teach them in, because I noticed it over a lot of students that if I just went down the rudiment listing and went flam, flam tap, and then the next one that they had a lot more trouble grasping those alternating patterns. So do those ones first, and then do flam tap, Swiss Army triplet, and all the ones with the more intricate stickings. So thanks for watching. That's my spiel on flams, flam rudiments, flam patterns, and how to teach them. Thanks a lot, guys.